Some hours ago, we lost one of our most distinguished scholars, a pioneer, Professor Abe, the major theoretician of the idea of negritude, writing about Senghor. He established the ON, encouraging local publications. He trained so many generations of scholars over a career that spanned half a century. Please, can we all rise up and observe a moment of silence? Sins and may he rest in paradise.
Language education, 1994 to 1998 for his PhD in language education. Professor Clement Olaniran Kolawole has taught in many universities since 1983, and he has risen through the ranks from assistant lecturer in 1993 to professor in the year 2008. He has attended conferences across countries in Africa, Europe, and in America. He was an exchange scholar at Kennesaw State University in Georgia in 2006, and has served his sabbatical at the University of Winneba, Ghana, between 2010 and 2011. Professor Olusegun Olaniran Kolawole has close to 100 publications in bullets across Nigeria and all over the world. He is a member of Senate, University of Ibadan, and has served as the 24th Dean, Faculty of Education, University of Ibadan, between 2011 and 2003. He has supervised 15 PhD theses and is married with children. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I present Professor Olaniran Kolawole.
Chair of the Governing Council of this great college, distinguished colleagues on the high table, the celebrant, our brother, Professor Falola, other members in the auditorium. I want to say that I appreciate the privilege of my being invited to speak here this morning or this afternoon, and I would be doing that within a couple of few minutes, because I've just been told that we are running far behind schedule. And I'm speaking on repositioning education in Africa to drive transformation. That topic has been coined from the theme of the conference, which is education and Africa's transformation. But I'd like to start by quoting Nelson Mandela, who said, and I quote, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world," end quote. My job, relatively, is simple today, and it is in three phases. One, to take a cursory look at Africa and its challenges of development. Two, to examine education as an instrument for promoting transformation. And three, highlight what needs to be done to reposition education so that it can be used to drive transformation in the continent. It is my belief that doing that will give us a proper perspective of the importance of this conference, which is organized to draw our attention to issues of concern to Africa, its people, and all of us here. I therefore welcome all participants to this conference. The material that I consulted gave me this data, and I'd like to go through them very quickly. Out of the 6 inhabitable continents in the world, Asia, North and South America, Europe, Australia, and Africa, in the world, Africa is unfortunately the least developed. in all material respects, like educationally, economically, socially, and infrastructure-wise. This is in terms of, a number of reasons. In spite of this, Africa has been described as the world's second largest and second most populous continent, with about 30.3 million kilometers square. It covers 6% of the Earth's surface area and 20.4% of its total land area. As of 2016, the population of the continent was put at 1.2 billion, thus accounting for about 16% of the world's total human population. It is surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea to the north, both the Suez Canal and the Red Sea along the Sinai Peninsula to the northeast, the Indian Ocean to the southeast, and the Atlantic Ocean in the west. Canada, BTEC 2016, SATSA 1999. These statistics are staggering and show why the continent should have been well developed if all things had been equal. But unfortunately, it has not developed as much as other continents and has continued to struggle to develop. Unfortunately, it has been referred to by some people who are not educated, who are not as informed as we expect them to be, as a jungle and a place that depends on the generosity of others. The African continent has evolved through various eras, including the pre-colonial, colonial, post-colonial, and contemporary, and has suffered various challenges in its evolution. It is an historical fact that the continental colonial masters, in various shapes and sizes, comprising Portugal, Belgium, Britain, and others, scrambled for and partitioned the continent of Africa among themselves and occupied various parts of Africa with the exception of Ethiopia and Liberia. The Berlin Conference of 1884 effectively put an end to the scramble and created room for the emergence of countries under various colonial masters, with each introducing what is considered necessary to sustain its influence on the continent. This happened without any input from the Africans themselves. Independent movement, which developed after the World War II, finally led to independence of most of the countries in the continent, in spite of the diversities of the various ethnic nationalities that make up each of the independent countries. The indecent lumping of various ethnic nationalities together in one country eventually became the seed of violent and intertribal struggles across the continent up to today. The current situation in Nigeria, the conflict in Rwanda in 1993, the endless war in Somalia and Sudan are sad reminders of the mistake made by the colonial masters. It's also on record that the countries in the continent became independent politically, but depend, unfortunately, on their former colonial masters economically, because their leaders fail to take advantage of the potentials they have to drive development in the country. Currently, there are 55 fully independent countries in the continent of Africa, but most of these countries are battling with one form of struggle or the other. This is why the United Nations 2016 remarked that most of the countries classified as least developed are in Africa. Why it was reported in the Poverty and Development in Africa 2016 that Africa is a continent endowed with immense potential and human resources, as well as great cultural, ecological, and economic diversity, but remains underdeveloped. The reasons for the underdevelopment of the continent have been traced to political instability, corruption, violence, civil unrest, dictatorship, authoritarianism, environmental pollution, poverty, underdevelopment, and lack of access to health facilities, lack of access to electricity, gainful employment, among others. Within the last couple of years, and particularly during the Arab Springs of 2010, which swept Colonel Muammar Gaddafi of Libya out of office, facilitated the removal of President Hosni Mubarak of Egypt and President Zain El Abidine of Tunisia from office, and subsequently promoted a major political earthquake in other parts of Africa, to Zimbabwe, where Mugabe has been in office for 37 years, Angola, Somalia, where the longest war has been waged, to Sudan, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Rwanda. Nigeria and many other countries where coup and counter-coups, wars have been fought. The problem of political instability has been a major factor in the development of the country. There cannot be development where there is no stable polity to plan and drive it. Next to instability is corruption. This is a major cankerworm that has likely impeded the development of the continent. This happens when the wealth of the continent is looted and transported to develop the economy of other European countries. Very recently, Cameroon, the former Prime Minister of Britain, described Nigeria as the most populous country, described Nigeria, the most popular country in Africa, as, I quote, fantastically corrupt, end quote. Some past and present leaders of the continent have specialized in looting of the treasury of their countries. For example, the late Mobutu Sese Seko of Zaire, Charles Taylor of Liberia, Kwamozu Banda of Malawi, Augustino Santo of Angola, Abacha of Nigeria, Yahya Jammeh of Gambia, and most other leaders of other countries were known to have virtually run the economy of their countries' prospects. A major indicator of underdevelopment in Africa is the level of poverty of the people. The level of income of the working class and the high percentage of the people out of job, coupled with the lack of job and access to basic necessity of life, have combined to make life difficult for most Africans. A journey across the major countries in Africa showed the appalling level of poverty of the people across the continent. It is not surprising that African Progress Panel, in its 2015 report titled Power, People and Planet, noted that 2 out of 3 Africans lack access to electricity, a commodity that's taken for granted in developed countries. Access to electricity is central to arresting the problem of deforestation, urban pollution, and other social problems that have stifled the growth of African economy. In spite of the weather, the seas and oceans that surround Africa, yet it has not been able to fully leverage on the resources to meet the electricity need of its people. Corruption and other social problems combine to force past leaders of most countries in Africa out of office, either through wars or elections, where they are unable to influence the outcome of such elections. We all know what happened in Gambia last year when Yahya Jammeh refused to leave office after he had congratulated his opponent, Mr. Barrow, after he had congratulated him for winning an outstanding election. The present president of France, Emmanuel Macron, was born the year the strongman of Zimbabwe, President Mugabe, became president. In spite of the fact that he has run the economy of his country aground, he has refused to step down at 93 years, while a young man of 40 is currently the president of France. While Ghana, Nigeria, and other countries have come to embrace democracy as an alternative to dictatorship and authoritarianism, it is yet to be shown that development will come with democracy in Africa, the way it has been demonstrated in other parts of the world. It is important to note that these problems, which have likely hindered the development of the continent, cut across the 5 regions of North, South, East, West, and Central African continent. It is an historical fact that the sub-Saharan region of the continent has been the most developed using the parameters of development by the United Nations in 2015. Going by the indices of development enunciated by the United Nations Human Development Report of 2015, it is doubtful whether the continent of Africa can boast of 20 countries which scored 50% on each of knowledge acquisition, decent standard of living, promotion of equity, social justice, human security and rights, environmental sustainability, participation in political and community life, security of life and property, equal access to education and gainful employment, and long and healthy life for all. It is doubtful whether all the Millennium Development Goals were achieved in most countries in Africa at the end of 2015. The question that is imperative to ask at this juncture is, can Africa and its people continue this way in the face of the developmental stride that other countries in the rest of the world have achieved? To me, the answer is a capital no. And if it is no, what options are open to the continent? Education as instrument for promoting transformation. Education has generally been accepted as instrument for promoting national economic, political, educational, and sustainable development, when fully funded and provided for the greater number of the people in any given country. Education is a process of transmitting value, skills, knowledge, and information to young members of the given community. It is through education that we come to know what we need to improve our quality of life and make access to knowledge and information available. This is where Paulo Freire, in his conscientization paradigm, believes that when knowledge through education is made available to a given people, or now they can change the total worldview and liberate themselves from all shackles of oppression, they will be in a better position to take action that will facilitate their emancipation. Similarly, Peters, 1966, seeks education as, and I quote, transmission of something worthwhile in a morally acceptable manner, end quote. The strength of this definition is that development of science and technology, application of information communication technology to various aspects of life, improved quality of life, and facilitated the development of the potentials of its recipients, has been demonstrated in Western countries. In fact, from traditional perspectives, education has been a means of producing a man of character, and one who is able to use his skills to advance the cause of the society in which the man lives. This is why in traditional practice of education, emphasis was placed on the production of skill acquisition, moral rectitude, and situation where every significant others contributes practically and meaningfully to the total education of recipients. It is from the foregoing that traditional education lays emphasis on the acquisition of knowledge of one's total worldview, possession of skills that will help one to contribute meaningfully towards improving the society, and acquisition of morals which makes it possible for a given individual to behave in ways that meet the expectations of the people. Unfortunately, Western education in Africa has not leveraged on the important features of traditional education in its quest to promote development among and for the people. This is one major problem that Africans are trying to address in their quest to balance Western and traditional educational practices. Looking at education from the utilitarian perspective, one tends to agree with Dewey, 1944, who sees education as, and I quote, necessity of life, a social function, as direction and as growth, end quote. We know that though education is not only measured through the narrow prism of Western definition, yet it is a strong factor of development, a factor that has been considered, as being relevant to the quest for Africa's transformation. The introduction of Western form of education places emphasis on knowledge, skill acquisition, good character, and ability to develop one's immediate environment without much coming from other members of the society. Western education promoted self-first and others later type of education. This is why several educated people in the continent today do not behave themselves in ways they are expected to behave, and in the process, they left the people behind. It is not surprising, therefore, to see that in spite of education, Africa has likely remained underdeveloped and has not met the dreams of those who fought to obtain independence for most countries in the continent. This sort of education that Julius Nyerere introduced in Tanzania under the German philosophy has not translated into effective promotion and development of the values of the people of Tanzania several years after his demise. Similarly, the effort made by Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, not only to develop his immediate country, Ghana, but the whole of Africa has not seen the light of the day several years after his death due to the inability of African leaders to fully promote the development of education and deploy it to drive transformation. A look at the landscape of education in Africa today shows that the continent has not been the best it should be because of several problems confronting its education. The problems range from untrained teachers, lack of resources through materials to promote real education, lack of access to qualified people, poor quality in terms of deliverables, overpopulation and under-resourced classrooms, inadequate so collapsed infrastructure, lack of access to ICT, electricity. Remember I said previously, a report has said that 2 out of every 3 Africans lack access to electricity, instructional materials, funding, poorly stocked libraries, and adequate supervision through monitoring. This put together accounted for the lamentation that, and I quote, the quality of education in Africa is in a perilous state, end quote. The African American Institute in its 2015 report on education in Africa has the following data, and I crave your indulgence to share a few of them with you to drive home the point that we need to transform education if indeed we are desirous of transforming the continent of Africa. Number 1, according to their report, there is increase in the number of primary school children enrolled in school, with the figure being 36.8% as at 2012. Out of 15 million children out of primary school globally in 2012, 38 million, 66% of them were Africans. Number 3, 552 million youth in the world in 2012 were eligible for primary school education. Only 49 million of them reside in Africa. Very few number compared to the global number. Only at least 80% of the 49 million of them could be accommodated due to lack of access. Teacher education has not received adequate attention, and so there is a problem of teacher shortage. Several mismatch exists between the skills of young African workers and the skills that employers need for today's global workforce. Though enrollment in universities in the continent has increased, there is a problem of overpopulation in lecture halls in most African universities. There are 50% more students per session at African universities compared to the rest of the global world. What is crystal clear from the above is that the problem of Africa, which is presently daunting, can be solved if we leverage on education. But the education that will drive transformation in Africa has to be such that is well focused, that addresses the myriads of problems facing the continent, and which incorporates what makes Africans uniquely different from the rest of the world. What needs to be done to reposition education in Africa? According to AAI 2015, page 10, and I quote, Africa needs strong education systems, which are key drivers of economic growth in the region, end quote. It further recommended that, and I quote, education has to be strengthened so that it absorbs the entry of millions of African young people. Because Africa is the world's most youthful continent with some 200 million young people that need to be genuinely employed but lack the skills required, end quote. To reposition education in Africa, therefore, emphasis has to be laid on the use of more indigenous languages as a medium of instruction. Languages which guarantee greater access to education by the people. Languages which will ensure that the people are properly educated and positioned to drive change in their respective localities. The non-use of several indigenous languages in Africa in formal education has grossly limited the involvement and participation of most Africans. This has further impeded the growth that would have taken place in every sector of the continent if the people's languages had been properly provided for in their education. In addition to this, African governments have to increase their funding of education to be able to provide, to improve the state of infrastructure, make learning materials available, fully accommodate children in the formal classrooms, train sufficient teachers that will man the schools, and actually deliver instruction using modern facilities made available through information communication technology devices. The state of most schools across the continent is currently nothing to write home about. Africa cannot continue with that situation and expect that inadequate and inappropriate education that is dished out by several unqualified teachers will be used to drive transformation in the continent. One of the major problems that most African countries are battling with today is unemployment. It is this unemployment that has led to the Arab Spring or offsprings of 2010 that led to a major crisis in North Africa and the part of the Middle East because of the problem of unemployment. Africa has to embark on aggressive funding of education to be able to provide all the things that are needed, currently lacking in the education sector. It's on record that most governments in Africa have abolished fees to allow more children to come to school. Others have increased their budgetary provision to meet the financial needs of most schools and colleges. This is a laudable move, but funding commitment to education in Africa has to increase towards the UNESCO benchmark of 26% of the annual budget of each country. Education is certainly very expensive and cannot effectively be borne by parents, most of whom are downtrodden and lack the economic power to support their children in school. It is gratifying to know that most countries in Africa have adopted the liberalization policy with a view to attracting corporate entities that can help to fund education to come into the sector, have values and good returns for their investment. In addition to the liberalization policy, most African countries are involved in public-private partnership initiatives as a means of raising the bar in the provision of infrastructure, libraries, laboratories, hostel accommodation, classrooms, and other supporting facilities that will improve the quality of education in the continent. In addition to the points above, African governments have to formulate policies that are homegrown and relevant to the needs and aspirations of their people. Africa cannot continue to wait for agencies such as UNESCO and UNO and several others to drive their development. The bold steps which led to the formation of African Union as an umbrella for cooperation among countries in Africa several years ago should be extended to the education sector. When this is done, the potentials of Africans will be harnessed through education. Africa should ensure that all its citizens that desire to be educated are properly and effectively provided for within the resources available to each country. African countries have to embrace democracy in ways that reflect our values and interests. If copying Western democracy is cumbersome and expensive, doing this will be a seamless process of leadership change in places, and we put a seamless process of leadership change in place, and we address the conflicts that accompany elections in the continent. For Africa to embrace this, education has to play a major role in such a way that enlightenment, sensitization, and mobilization have to be embarked upon before elections take place. Africa cannot continue to be seen as a place where civilization and good standard of behavior, even in public offices, is difficult to embrace. One important benefit of education is enlightenment. This enlightenment has to be used to drive the transformation of the continent through the recognition of people who are educated and have acquired skills and competencies that are needed to drive development in the continent. African countries cannot continue to deny its people. They deny their people the opportunity they need to promote development in the continent. This is why sit-tight presidents should be eased out of office so that the political space can be widened and the economic potentials of such countries given opportunity to flourish for the greater good of the people. In conclusion, It is very clear from the foregoing that education in its present form in Africa cannot effectively drive the much needed transformation of the continent because it is heavily encumbered. If education is to be used to transform Africa, it has to first and foremost be transformed, be strengthened, and be properly focused, funded, and repositioned to be used as a catalyst that will propel the transformation of Africa. I have attempted some suggestions of what I think will be done to achieve these desired transformation. I have no doubt papers to be presented during the conference will generously address other important themes of the conference. And I wish everybody a successful deliberation during the conference. Thank you so much.
Please, we can have a big round of applause for Professor Kolawole. Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, I told you that we had a friend that was coming on the way a while ago. And, you know, in the States, they had Ogbeni. In my own little way of analysis and criticism, I said that is a very humble way of addressing oneself. But when you now say Arakuni, that makes the person closer to you. You know, you point at somebody, hey, Ogbeni, but when you say Arakuni, that person is very close to you. So we have one of the Arakuni around here. It is a pleasure to welcome to this great citadel the representative of Arakuni Oluwarotimi Akeredolu, the governor of Ondo State, who himself is also an Arakuni, Honorable Agbola Ajayi, the deputy governor. Please, we can give our governor a big round of applause. Please do it though. I don't want to tell you that we have been looking forward to a time that the governor will come and say all the roads to my 13, just 5 kilometers. For those State Asphalt Company, do it. I know that before he leaves today, something will come to this college. Yes, now. So before now, he has. I told you the last time that this is a working table. So he's going to perform a job here, and that job is he's going to address us as the head of the state and formally declare the Toyin Falola International Conference open. So, Your Excellency, sir, those are the two tasks. You want to talk to us? No, you will come there, sir. Please, a big round of applause for the governor.
Well, I'm not a tall man, but I'm sure everybody can see me up there. Kabiyesi, the chairman of the Governing Council, my brother, the provost, Professor Ogen. I can also see my big brother here, the VC of Osutec. All invited guests from the international community that are here. Great Nigeria students. For the greatest, thank you. For the greatest, Bobo. Yeah, that's what you want. Well, let me first apologize for coming late. We have one or two things that was pressing and we have to attend to it. If I leave here now, I'll be on my way to Abuja. I'm sorry for taking your time. Like the MC said, I want to assume that the conference has not started. Yes, I will declare it open, then we will not start at first. Yes, I bring greetings from Arakuni himself, the governor of Ondo State, Oluwarotimi Akeredolu. He sends greetings and wishes all of you. Welcome you to Ondo State, the Sunshine State. It's a great thing to host an international event like this in Ondo State. We are happy and we want to appreciate the organizer of this program. The program, like I said, is Tony Falola International Conference on Africa and the African diaspora. I've looked at and listened the little minutes I spent there. I listened to the professor. I'm not a professor, I'm a lawyer, but I can also grab one or two things you have just said. Before I declare the program up, I want to welcome everybody and thank them. And also appeal. Maybe this should be a sort of message to our African leaders that are here, who are not even here, but who are here in their capacity, that those who represent them. Yes, education, our leaders should not see it as an investment. We shouldn't see education as an investment, but we should see it as a fact that every government and every nation should give to their citizens. You can imagine, when I was young, I can never imagine that we'll have what we call Boko Haram in Nigeria. I can never imagine in my life. In those days, my father, when they went to the north, they would come back and say the most peaceful area in Nigeria is the northern part of the country. But suddenly people just come out and said, Boko Haram. The meaning of Boko Haram is no to Western education. You can imagine that we have a lot of job to do now. If our people are now saying that no to what we said everybody must attain, that's a big task that all of us must do. But for us to achieve this, we just have to, as a matter of policy in Africa, especially the African Union, the ECOWAS country, adopt uniform curriculum. Maybe this will help all of us a lot. If you adopt a uniform curriculum, I want to appreciate and commend the effort of the federal government. The federal government, through their tag, they call something tag. I'm sure the professors are here, they know what I mean by tag. Technical it comes. The federal government will send teachers from here to Zambia, to Gambia, to Cameroon, to other countries in Africa for them to teach them. We are paying them. Federal government on their own, we give them money, incentive for those teachers. Some will go there for 3 months, some will go there for 5 months, some will go there for 2-3 years. These are the aids the Nigerian government are giving to other Africans, and I want to condemn that. If we encourage a uniform curriculum, honestly, I'm sure Africa will get to where we should be. Yes, it is not totally too bad now, but I believe that if we spend 60%, even 40% of our annual budget on education, it will transform. It's not just going to transform, but it will make a positive impact in our life, and society will be better for it. I want to also talk about technology. Technology, yes, it is something that we don't have to also flog the issue again. We don't have to flog the issue again. This is the area of research which we think that there's no money, there's no money in oil again. We must be able to educate our people so that they can also identify and look inward. What can we get in Africa? We have everything. In Nigeria, for example, we have everything that can make this country great. But what is our major problem is that we don't even have, we can't give what we don't have. So we need a lot of enlightenment. Like what the propagation, education, if we have education, security, nobody will come and tell you that, this bomb will kill you. Don't do this. That is what we need to do. It's not to just read and write alone, but it will further enlighten us, open up, and open our eyes to so many things we have. Again, to our students that are here, I want to commend the provost. Adeyemi College of Education is one of the most institutions that we have in Nigeria. I commend you for that. The issue of courts and courtesy that is not pronounced, and we thank God by the grace of God. It's not going to be pronounced in this institution by the grace of God. once again, on behalf of Ondo State Government, I want to officially declare this conference.
So I am not interrupting His Excellency. This plaque, which is the official TOFAC plaque, Your Excellency will hand this over to the Vice Chancellor, the Provost of this institution. This is what TOFAC participants chase around the globe. It has traveled from Ibadan to Durban in South Africa, to Pretoria. It has come down to Ede, now to Ondo, and it is going to Kenya next year. So you will present this as the mark of the official place to our Prof.
All right. So let me first declare the program open, then I'll present it. Yes, like I said, on behalf of Ondo State Government, I want to officially declare this conference open to the glory of God and for the benefit. I wish everybody useful celebration. Thank you. This, he said, is from. He's from where now? Okay, from Ede. This one is from University. Is now. He has just traveled all the way to Ondo now at the Adeyemi College of Education. Then we want to officially hand over this TOFAC to the Provost of Adeyemi College of Education. Officially, thank you.
They don't require a lot of space, and they're very efficient to access for students. and we continue to build on this e-library. The current one contains over 120 books, 120,000 books, something like that. So it's a lot. And finally, we will continue to build on this and assist in publishing the volumes emanating from this conference. Thank you very much.
Please, we are all going to benefit from that. I can see one of our librarians there, Mr. Jato, is so excited. It's not only him that should be excited, and everybody here who is a member of this institution should please applaud that once again. Before we have the final keynote, please want to invite the provost, Professor Olukoya again, who will introduce this next person. When I introduced him initially as a royal father, there is something that connects the throne to education that I want Professor Ogen to just give us as he introduces the next person. By the time you listen to him, you know that he's not here because of the crown alone, but because of his interest in education.
Your Excellency, Kabiyesi, distinguished members of the high table, distinguished colleagues, it is my honor and pleasure to invite Oba Adedokun Abolari, the Orogun of Ila, for a 5-minute talk on what he's doing for education in Africa, which is going to excite all of us, and for which he has our 100% support from this college. Kabiyesi.
To be here amongst distinguished scholars, and my friends are here, very many of them. I'm seeing Tola Badejo, Professor Tola Badejo, who with another friend, Professor Jidewe, almost planned a coup that I should not be installed as the Orogun of Okeila, because they believed that to be a king was demeaning, especially for very many of us. But to the glory of God, I am a monarch, and I thank the Lord Almighty for the opportunity of service. Professor Toyin Falola, we grew up together, as he rightly said, and he trained me. We grew up in the same neighborhood, and I was following him cerebral since he had always been cerebral, and in quote, a rascal. And Professor Toyin Falola, because Madam, I'm sorry, I knew him before you. He went to a secondary school in the whole Western region that was not recognized for good deeds, and that is Oke-Ibadan High School. And Professor Toyin Falola did not grow up in Bodija area of Ibadan, or Ring Road. I knew him in 1965 when we moved to Agugu in Ibadan. And he was living in Aremo in Ibadan. I mean, just to tell you the kind of background that has propelled an international figure. And becoming a king, I saw it as an opportunity in my own little way to contribute my own quota to the development of education. I'm the Orokun of Okeila in Osun State. My children, please stand up, come out, and let's see. I know our father, Professor Shutokun, is not seen them for the first time. I delivered a lecture in his university some time ago, and my students were there. Some 2-3 days ago, I delivered a lecture at the Bafet Nawalawa University to the law students. My children were there. These are children of the poor. Some of them are orphans. They are products of the public school system. And we're trying to use education to fight poverty in our own little way. I invited Professor Organ to see what I was doing. And I guess he was shocked to see the little contribution we are making. I guess he was amazed at the little that we are doing to transform. And all we are doing is based on the biblical saying in the book of Isaiah. I say it all the time. That's my mission statement in the book of Isaiah 58:12. And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places. They shall build foundations for many generations. And they shall be called the repairer of the breach and the restorer of the path to dwell in. After I've been given good education, in Nigeria, becoming a monarch, I think I should contribute my own little quota to the development of the poor. So that's why I have 74 now, and we are moving to 94. And it's a boarding school. And to the glory of God, they are not paying a dime. I'm not a rich man, but my friends are supporting me. Tola Badejo, I thank you. There are only 2 quota. I won't mention my highlights, but I will mention Idozi must be supported. And they're all supporting me. I thank you all, my friends. If you support me to take care of these children, wow, I'm fulfilled. Now, I just want you to meet them and introduce themselves and a little of the back. Please don't, they are not from a sophisticated environment, but we want them to take over. They are taking over from you. They are leaders of the future, because I tell them that they are taking over from us, and they must do it well. Yes or no? Yes or no? That's very good.
My name is Abiola Timothy. I am from Okelara local government. I was admitted to the Abolari College after the death of my father. My mother is a teacher. My pushing ambition is to become a pastor.
My name is Jaro I'm from Benue State, but I live in Ibadan, Boluwaduro local government. I was admitted to Abalari College the year 2016. My father's occupation is farming. My ambition is to become a great lawyer.
My name is Adivara Idowu. I'm native of Onya, but I live in Ikirun. I have only a single parent. I lost my father on 9th December 2016. My future ambition is to become a great pharmacist.
My name is Ogundiyo Priscilla. I'm a native of Ada. I'm a native of Ada.
My name is Akupudasho. I'm from Ibadan. I'm working Papa before I came to the Abalari College. This is how I work. Fine, Papa. Papa, my future ambition is to become a professor.
My name is Lady Blessing. I'm from Okelon. I live with my late father's home in Okelon. I used to work by tables before I came to the Abalari College. This is how I work. My future ambition is to become a great lawyer.
My name is Oluwale Faith. I'm a native of Ozo Ekiti State, but I live in Ilorin. I always roam about after school hours before I came to the Abalari College, having nothing to do. My future ambition is to become a great neurosurgeon.
My name is Adela Stella. I'm from Ororu of Olukwe local government. I am an orphan child. I have no father, no mother. I was working fufu before I came to the Abalari College. This is how I work. Fufu Bolande. I'm learning fufu today. My future ambition is to become a great lawyer.
they make me happy. I'm always in their midst. I'm always in their midst. I'm always in their midst. I devote everything that I have building these children up. And I pray that the Lord Almighty will crown our efforts brilliantly well. Now, before we sit down, they can do a lot of things. These children are entrepreneurial. I tell them by the time they get to the university, they're going to be responsible for their education. They know how to do everything. They plait their hair, they barb their hair, they know how to bake the cake, they know how to do puff-puff, they know how to do zobo. We make our gari ourselves. We do our lafun because you need to visit us on our farm. We have a large farm, and they pride themselves as good farmers. And 95% of the 74 students pride themselves as good farmers. 95% of them. Now sing whatever you want to sing before you sit down. Sing for the audience.
We all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. I help you carry on. It won't be long. I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride. If I have things you need to borrow, no one can feel those of your needs. That will let you and God of your life when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean.
That's okay. That's okay. Now, before you go, just this is we promote indigenous. Everything indigenous. They must think indigenous. Their Yoruba is fantastic. They love. In fact, we are thinking that we are likely to change the uniform of the school, and maybe we go the Wesley College style. If you read the autobiography of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, chapter 5, when he was a student of Wesley College, they were using local fabrics, Buba and Shokoto. Now, the principal of that school that time, F.S. Nightingale, was admonishing them to always think indigenous, was always admonishing them that they must do things the Nigerian way. I think it's high time we go back to the roots. It's high time. It's high time we go back to the roots, so as to reduce the level of employment amongst our teeming youths. If our teeming youths that are so creative will be able to sew clothes for thousands, millions of children, they won't be traveling abroad, wandering around state capitals of the world. It's important to think indigenous. Loba, loba.
Oh,
KBC, I want to support the initiative for this afternoon. Others will come with a sum of 100,000.
My Chairman, Your Excellency, the Chairman of Governing Council, KBC, and the distinguished members of this side of the working table, sincerely, I know if we have people like KBC, just 10 of them, multiplied by 94, then you know what will happen in Nigeria. Children, take over, you will, in Jesus' name. And well, you know, at times we don't have the power over our governors, the powers from above and things like that. But if I have my way, I would have insisted that the governor will stay with us till the end of the program. But since I don't have my way, and they say a beggar, I don't like a choice. I prefer shoes. So the beggar has no shoes in this case. So he has to tread softly. Our governor may want to take his leave, but we appreciate him that he has come at all. And sir, you must make Adeyemi your other home. We will soon call you again. And we also want Arakunrin to be here as many times as we will invite him. I have to also announce the presence in our midst of Professor Idika Christiana. She's from the Graduate School of Philosophy and Theology, St. George, Frankfurt, Germany. Prof, you're welcome. And we have Nami Saichi from Guai. He's the representative of our supervisory agency, the National Commission for Colleges of Education, and is representing that board in the Governing Council. Now, welcome, sir. I didn't mention my sister the other time, Dr. Chinelo Onoebu, the Director of Gender Studies and Affairs in this institution. Madam, welcome. Dr. Bridget Awoshika is going to do the citation of the next keynote presenter. And please, you know, this is wonderful. I've attended so many where we presented just one, and people felt they should sleep in a bit. But we have presented two, and this is the third, and nobody is feeling the heat. Please, a big round of applause for this audience. And for our delegates, please, we'll still take your names and the read. Please, shall we rise as the governor takes his leave, please? Musical interlude, please. Now, the music department. Yes, I think we can go on with your interlude now. At this point, I would like us to finish and conclude high. So before we do the next keynote, which is the last major item on the program this afternoon, I want to invite the cultural dancers for a brief interlude. After the presentation of the third keynote address, we just have the official handover of the TOFAC plaque to the next coach in Kenya, and that's going to be the last item. So before we have the keynotes, please let's have that cultural interlude. Please, this presentation is for the title, A Glee of Africa. A Glee of Africa in Drumming and Dancing. So it's a typically cultural affair. Welcome you. Please enjoy yourself.
Moriba bàbá mi, ìbà kọ́dá, ìbà ṣẹ̀dá, ọba tó ń bẹ káyé tó máa bẹ. Ọba lápá ńlá tá a ní kó ti náírà ní, tá a tún ní kó wọlé dé ní. Mo ṣe bá ládéládé, ọba òkè ìlà ọ̀rọ̀ fún. Mo ṣe bá yínkádé ó pẹ́ lórí bàbá, kẹ́sì ọba ó jẹ kó pẹ́. Mo ṣe bá lóyè lóyè, mo ṣe bá gbogbo ọ̀jọ̀gbọ́n tó ń bẹ nílé, mo ṣe bá ọkùnrin, mo ṣe bá obìnrin. Torá abiyamọ ni wọ́n, gbogbo abiyamọ tó bá ń bẹ bí. Mo ní kí ẹ bá mi ṣẹ́wọ́ àdúrà kẹ́ ẹ wípé mi ò ní fọwọ́ mi gbọ́mọ sí wọn.
Wow.
chairman, professors, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. That presentation was done by the Department of Music at the Academy of Education here. Some of the drummers are actually lecturers and delegates of TOFAC. So, and I think 2 others are students. So please let's give them a round of applause. Yes, now we invite Dr. Bridget Awoshika to present the citation of Professor Falun Gong. And we go into the third keynote address.
Our distinguished professors, my employer, the chairman of our governing council, academic gurus in the house, ladies and gentlemen, I have the singular honor this afternoon to present the citation of no other person than Professor Falun Gong. Can you please stand, sir, and step forward? He's so short, almost times 2 of my height. Professor Falun Gong is a professor of anthropology and director of the federally funded Title VI African Language Program at Boston University, USA. His research interests encompass interactions between African languages and non-African languages, the various adaptations of Islam in sub-Saharan Africa, and the Ajami literatures, records of African languages which are written in Arabic script. He seeks to understand the knowledge and epistemologies buried in African Ajami literatures and the historical, social, cultural, and religious heritage that has founded expression in this manner. Another critical area of his work is the LADO, Languages Analysis for Determination of National Origin, LADO. LADO is an emerging subfield of forensic linguistics. His numerous works have appeared in several leading scholarly journals, including the African Studies Review, the Journal of Arabic and Islamic Studies, Language Variation and Change, and International Journal of Sociology of Language. He has published and co-edited several books, amongst which the most recent is the Muslims Beyond the Arab World. This is the Odyssey of Ajami and the Moridia, which was published by the Oxford University Press in 2016. Professor Ngong has also held several prestigious fellowships, which include the West African Research Association Fellowship for Postdoctoral Studies, which he won in the year 2004. He also won the American Council of Learned Societies for Social Sciences Research and the Council of National Endowment for the Humanities Fellowship in the year 2004. He is a Fulbright scholar, so he has won the Fulbright Lecturing and Research Fellowship between the years 2007, 2008, and beyond. Professor Ngong is a distinguished winner of the John Simon Goodhend Memorial Foundation Fellowship between year 2011 and year 2012. Let's award is the most prestigious distinction award of the American Academia. Can we give another rousing applause? Professor Ngom also won the British Library Acadia Endangered Archives Program Award, which made him to have a grant in 2011 for his digital library, which he called the African Ajami Library, AAL. It will be of interest to us all to know that over 230,000 people around the world have visited the African Ajami Library, AAL, that Professor Ngom founded at the Boston University. I have a singular honor this day to present Professor Falo Ngom as the third keynote presenter for the TOEFL 2017 conference.
I'm very short, so I was thinking of reducing my height by removing my hat, but somebody forced me to wear it. I would like to say a few words of gratitude to several people, and the first one being Professor Toyin Falola. There has been many testimonies about Professor Toyin Falola's work within Nigeria, among Nigerian colleagues and students. I experienced and benefited from Professor Falola's impact outside of Nigeria. And I am here to represent those who have benefited from him and his leadership, his global leadership in knowledge production about Africa. We were very saddened today when he announced the departure of Professor Abiola Irele. And I think it is a very sad moment for Africa in general, not only Nigeria, but also an opportunity to celebrate our heroes while they're alive, and not to wait when they pass to celebrate them. I think we should take this opportunity to celebrate Professor Toyin Falola while he is here with us. I am very proud of Nigeria. You see, I have traveled around the country. It's my first time to Nigeria. I am from Senegal. I am very impressed by the leadership of Nigerian institutions. I am proud of this great country, its citizens, its students, more specifically the students of this great institution. So I will file an application to become a Nigerian citizen very soon. So what I want to do now is to share with you a new domain of research, a domain of research and study that is emerging only in Europe, that has reached a little bit the US, in which I think the students of this institution should be leaders. And it is the field of language analysis in asylum cases. What is language analysis in asylum cases? Among the people that you see, this is an image that we all know. Asylum seeking, either from wars in the Middle East or in Africa, have led many Western governments to use language to identify who is a genuine asylum seeker and who is not. How do you know when this person is speaking Arabic from Syria, or is speaking Hausa of northern Nigeria or Hausa of Niger? How do you know that this person is speaking Mandinka from Senegambia, not Mandinka from Guinea? How do you know that his claims are credible? Because these people who show up have no documents. And I think this is an area, an important area of linguistic law and international migration that should bear our knowledge, that should engage our knowledge of our local cultures and our local languages, so that we can minimize the errors that some of them make. And so what I want to do is to share with you some of the history of this practice. Asylum applications have increased due to wars, poverty, population displacement, and migration in the world. In doubtful asylum claims, many Western governments now use language analysis to differentiate what they call economic refugees or bogus asylum seekers from genuine asylum applicants. There are usually two types of analysis. The first one is what is referred to as expertise, and the second one is what is referred to as contra-expertise. So, for example, if someone is applying for asylum in, say, Switzerland, and they claim that they come from, say, a war-torn country of Guinea-Bissau, and they claim that they speak Portuguese Creole, the government usually finds someone who is legal in that country and asks them to listen to the recording and to see if the way the person speaks is consistent with what we know about people in Guinea-Bissau. Usually this person has no linguistics training. Usually this person has no formal preparation to assess the credibility of the claim. The second part is the contra-expertise. That's where, after analysis of the government experts, the applicant is usually given one last chance, and that is a lawyer is assigned the case, and they may look in the publications. If it's Hausa, they may look at the University of Ibadan or this institution to see if there is a scholar who is an expert in that language, to review the analysis. That's the contra-expertise. Once that is done, the immigration judge would decide, based on the evidence, where to send that person, or whether the case is confirmed that it's a genuine asylum case. So these are really the two major elements. But the problem is, many of these conclusions are unfounded. The so-called experts of these governments in Europe and Australia, the people they use to review these asylum cases, the conclusions are false. Because just because you're a native speaker, it doesn't make you an expert of your language. You can be a good Yoruba speaker from Ibadan, but it doesn't make you an expert of all Yoruba varieties. You can be a good speaker of Hausa of northern Nigeria, but it doesn't make you an expert of all the Hausa varieties. So the problem is, these systems are actually being used for unfair determination of origin. And that's where we have to be engaged to make sure that the system uses credible evidence to adjudicate these serious cases among people who are among the most vulnerable. That's really what involves us. Now, the definition of a refugee based on the United Nations High Commissioner of Refugees, which was adopted in 1951, about 147 countries signed the agreement. The legal definition of a refugee is owing to well-founded fear of being persecuted for reason of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, political opinion, is outside his or her own country, and because they fear that they may be arrested or killed or persecuted. So if you meet any of these requirements that you are being legitimately persecuted, all the countries that have signed this agreement have to adjudicate your case. And if it is credible, they have to grant you asylum. Now, asylum seekers boomed as the Soviet Union fell and war broke out in the Balkans, in the Middle East and in part of Africa. The Swedish Migration Board pioneered a modern version of the Bible's chivalrous test for authenticating the claims of some asylum seekers. The fact of using language, the way you speak, to determine where you're from is not new. They're only using the newest versions of an old practice, which was called the chivalrous test. In the book of Judges of the Hebrew Bible, the pronunciation of the word Shibboleth was used to distinguish members of the Ephraim tribe whose dialect lacked the sh sound from the Gilead tribe whose dialect included the sound. Anyone who wanted to cross the Jordan River had to say Shibboleth, which meant flood water. According to the book of Judges, about 42,000 men of Ephraim died for want of current civility. So, during a war context, to cross the river Jordan, the difference between sir and sh, the difference between saying chivalrous and civilous, was used to identify foes from friends, and 42,000 people died. Now, think about it. Just because one variety does not have sh, resulted in the death of 42,000 men. What these new governments are doing is using a modern version of this system to try to determine who is an asylum seeker and who is not. And this was not the only case. During the Sinhalese against the Tamil in Sri Lanka, in 1983, the police also stopped civilians and asked them to say the Sinhalese word bucket, which is palbadia. Tamils were killed for saying palbadia. Again, the difference here between b and b led to the death of people. So today, a more elaborate chivalrous test is used to regulate international borders and to determine the origin of asylum seekers in many Western European countries and Australia. The Australian government quibbled with Ecuador and SPRACAP for failing to use the IPA and characterized their analysis as amateur with a simplistic understanding of how language works. The reliability of these chivalrous tests was also challenged by a group of Australian linguists whose investigations found that these two companies contradicted the applicant's claim in 58 of 58 cases, but when those 48 cases appealed, 35 of them were found to be genuine asylum applicants. In Australia, 48 cases were incorrectly denied asylum on the basis that they did not come from the country where they claimed to be from, because the so-called expert did not have the expertise necessary to determine their origin, and therefore they ruled that these were not from the places they claimed to be from. But luckily, one of the judges had an elementary level of linguistics training and doubted these results. And a group of linguists got involved. When they double-checked these cases, they found that 35 of them were actually running for their life. They were actually credible asylum cases. And these are important areas where I think the students I see here could help become leaders, or the children who are here today. What Professor Bogda noted, that because often these analysts who work as experts for this government lack knowledge, at least formal knowledge, when they ask what are their credentials, the only credential they often say is that they come from the country in question and they know how people speak there. That's their own qualification. As if being from Ondo makes you an expert of all Yoruba varieties, or being from Kaduna makes you an expert of all Hausa varieties in the region. The other problem is that in many cases, these so-called experts are expatriates who have not visited their countries for so many years and are not up to date on the new terms and variations in their own languages. I am sure that the way the young people speak now is very different from the way older generations speak, because language keeps changing and evolving. And being absent from your country, even for a year, makes you ignorant of the innovative ways that language has changed. So using these experts who have been expatriates for 10 years as experts is a fundamental problem, because the expert compares the applicant's variety to their variety, not to the variety in current use in the country, and therefore has usually generated incorrect analysis and unfair assessments. These challenges are actually greater when you have languages with larger dialects, with more dialects. Let's take Hausa. Let's take Yoruba, let's take Mandinka, let's take Fulani, languages that are distributed in wide regions that are localized, because in each region you will have different nature, different ecology, different reality, different cultures, and all the different ethno-linguistic groups that localizes the variety, so that you will find vowels and consonants that are specific to that region. You will find words that are specific to that region because the ecology is different. So, how do you assess these varieties when you have been absent for 20 years? This gives you an example of the complexity of this system. And what is the role of scholars? What is the role of education? What is the role of Africans? What is the role of especially African youth? I'm giving you this example as applied to Africa, but this is not only a process for asylum applications from Africa. This is also applied to people who apply for asylum from the Arab world. I'm just giving you this example, but this is a field, I think, for those who specialize in languages and linguistics and law. This is a domain of a new field of interest that I think many of the students I see here should be the leaders, because they have the linguistic training. They have many of them are multilingual, and they could develop skills that no one else would be able to surpass. Other things that are also interesting when you look at these analyses is the arbitrariness of political borders versus linguistic borders in Africa. Equating national borders with linguistic and ethnic borders in West Africa shows ignorance of colonial history, the past and current population movement, and the ethnic and linguistic ties between the people in the region. Now, testing applicants' knowledge. During the recording that is often used to evaluate whether this person is from where they claim to be from, the best methodology, we think, is what we call the Labovian sociolinguistic method, which triggers spontaneous speech. Now, many people will wonder, what is spontaneous speech? As in every field, if you want to fake, if you're from Ondo, but you want to fake your Yoruba so you can sound like someone from Ibadan, what do? How long can you fake it? Spontaneous speech is the speech that comes out unfiltered. It's the speech that's natural. It's the speech that comes out when you encounter a lion in the forest. It's the speech that captures your linguistic fingerprints. It's the speech that comes out when you're about to walk on a cobra and you jumped. The speech that comes out is your spontaneous speech. This spontaneous speech is what we need to capture, because it's there that we will find the features of your own variety. If you claim that you're from Ondo, when we have 1 hour of recording of that speech, we should be able to verify whether the features there are consistent with the people who were born and raised in Ondo. This is how they should be trained. These analysts should be trained. The second one is what we call lowering the affective filter. When people are interviewed in asylum cases, people who have traveled for long, people have traveled and have undergone suffering and are stressed out, it's important to lower affective filter so you can trigger spontaneous speech. Lowering the affective filter is asking them questions in which they're interested. Asking them questions about pepper soup. If they are from an area that is known for good pepper soup. If they are from Senegal, ask them questions about kebuje, or what you call jollof rice. So ask them questions that are related to their own lives. Ask them about their rituals. If they are women, ask them about weddings, the songs. These will trigger spontaneous speech. It will lower the affective filter. Targeting appropriate registers. If you are interviewing someone who claims to have been born and raised in Ibadan, in the urban center, and is a young person with some level of education, it makes sense to ask them about local politics. It makes sense to ask them about local schools, the name of local schools. But if you're interviewing someone who claims that they come from an area in the rural hinterlands where he has not or she has not been exposed to education, it doesn't make any sense to ask them to sing the national anthem, because they do not know the national anthem.
And so the problem in these assessments is that they have one standard form that they ask to everybody. And so they have one form with questions, and it is that form of question that is asked to everybody, regardless of whether you are educated or not. Therefore, the data that is generated is unfair and biased, will lead to incorrect conclusions in cases where people are actually from there. The implication is that someone who is from Kaduna could be sent to Niger, Niamey, or someone from Niamey could be sent to southern Chad, where there is a group of Hausa speakers. These are the serious implications of what I'm talking about. So it's important to the right questions. Gendered knowledge, and I'm just going to stop there and conclude to give you the dimensions of taboo knowledge becomes also very important. The meaning of silence varies from culture to culture. In some cultures, silence tolerance can last long. Among the Aboriginals in Australia, if you ask someone what's your name, they can wait for a minute before they answer. So let me give you an example. What's your name? And then you stay. My name is Farouk. This has legal implications. Among the Aboriginals, one of our colleagues found that many young Aboriginals in Australia, in whose culture tolerance of silence is law, were being jailed, put into jail, in prison, because the jury and the judges who judged them thought they were lying, that they were hiding, because the tolerance, the silence tolerance was different. So when a judge asks you a question, what's your name? Did you do this? You wait for 1 minute to answer. That's a problem, because in the judge subculture, that length of silence is unacceptable. It does not mean that the person is a criminal. And so what happened when Diana Eid looked at the cultures, what's the length of, the acceptable length of silence, she was able to find out that the problem was actually the different silence tolerance level that was misconstrued as being lying or evasiveness. That's number one. Number two, eye contact. In the Western culture, eye contact is not good. Is eye contact with an elder? Now in the Western culture, I'm sorry, eye contact is very good. In fact, you were taught to look at people when they speak. What happens if you look at an older Yoruba in the eye?
You see the difference. You see the seriousness. In the Western cultures,
when you talk to people and you look down,
in my African culture.
To an older man that as my uncle, and I decided to implement what my mom and my dad taught me, and I was to look down when I talked to him. And so he thought I was lying, I was hiding something. He told me 3 times, why don't you look at me when I talk to you? What's wrong with you? Are you hiding something? I decided to be silent because I could not be rude to someone who is older than me. A month later, he gave us an assignment. I did the assignment, and I came to his office and I was explaining the assignment to him. He was so happy. But he told me again, but what's going on? You must be hiding something. Why are you talking to me and looking down? What's there? And that's when I told him, I come from an age-set society where prestige and respect is acquired through age. And I'm taught that the older you are, the more you have earned my respect. And I can challenge you by staring. And he was stunned. He'd never heard that before. So you can see the serious implication of cultural differences. We've touched on silence. We've touched on eye contact. We can touch on many others. And these are the resources that are now being used combined with language to determine whether your fellow African is from the Gambia or Senegal or from, can you hear me? Okay. And I think we should be leaders. We should be the ones in this area to make sure these cultural dimensions do not get misunderstood, so that we can do justice to those people whose cases are well founded, so that we can make sure when these systems are being used, the right people are identified and justice is served. And I think this is why I initially began by saying this is a very important area that I believe our students here should be the first ones to be involved. In conclusion, the 2 other things that I want to highlight before concluding besides the cultural dimension related to the silence. I don't know about Yoruba culture, but I'm sure they may have similarities. Silence sometimes is actually a proof of knowledge, not lack of knowledge. Among the Mandinka of Senegambia, if you go through circumcision, you spend 3 months in the wilderness with men. You are trained of how to become a good person and a good husband. The songs that you learn, the knowledge of